Again, I have left grading comments on your um, papers for the Unit 2 assignment, but I wanted to provide a little bit more perspective on the Ford Pinto case, which is the subject of that assignment. The Ford Pinto case is studied often in ethics courses because it seems to pit profit against human life. The case is presented as Ford conducting a cost-benefit analysis that compared the cost of correcting the problems with the fuel tank in the car against the value of human life. And in that context, just about everyone agrees that there is no argument that Ford's decision not to fix the problem and just pay damages for human lives that were lost was unethical. However, there are other factors that influenced Ford's decision, and while Ford's decision was probably the wrong decision, these other factors made Ford's decision less easy than it seems to have been looking back at the situation. For example, the Ford Pinto met federal regulations issued by the Federal Highway Traffic Safety Administration at the time, although those regulations were changed after the Pinto went into production. Other cars that were similar to the Pinto, made by other manufacturers, the Vega made by Chevrolet, the Corolla made by Toyota, a sedan made by Datsun, now Nissan, and the Beetle made by Volkswagen, were governed by the same regulations as the Pinto, and the Vega and the Corolla and the Datsun had fuel tanks in the same position as the Pinto. Of course, the Beetle had the fuel tank in the front since the Beetle was a rear-engine car. Ford was criticized for putting a dollar value on human life when it did its cost-benefit analysis, but the value that Ford put on human life that it used in making that comparison was the value that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration used when it made calculations about the dangers posed by various automotive problems. So the value that Ford used was the standard value, and the idea that the value of human life could be compared to repair cost was not Ford's idea, but a concept that federal regulations used. Another factor that reflected badly on Ford was the fact that the problem with the Pinto received so much publicity, some of which was inaccurate. There was an article in the magazine Mother Jones at the time that greatly exaggerated the number of people who had been killed and injured as a result of the problems with the Ford Pinto, and although that article was inaccurate, it became the source of much of the criticism of Ford. The fact is that the Pinto was probably not much more dangerous than other cars in its class and was actually less dangerous than some of the cars in its class. For instance, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration determined in 1975 that the deaths per million people caused by similar cars were the Chevrolet Vega, 288 deaths per million people, the Datsun, 294 deaths per million people, the Ford Pinto, 298 deaths per million people, the Toyota Corolla, 333 deaths per million people. That's 333 deaths per million people. And the Volkswagen Beetle, 378 deaths per million people. So the Ford Pinto did not cause many more deaths than the Chevrolet Vega or the Datsun sedan, and it didn't cause as many deaths as the Toyota Corolla and the Volkswagen. So the decision that Ford made not to fix the problem with the Pinto was, in hindsight, the wrong decision. But given the circumstances of the time, it was a much more difficult decision than is often portrayed.